Hello everyone, welcome to Daily English Pro, your place to improve English every single day. Stay focused, listen carefully, and try to repeat after what you hear. Let's get started.
Hello, you've arrived at the right place for a deep dive into some incredibly important global topics. Today we're going to tackle environment and climate change head on.
We certainly are.
This deep dive is crafted using a collection of information to build a really solid understanding of these critical issues, the kind of knowledge that empowers you to discuss them clearly, perhaps useful for something like sharpening your skills for IELTS listening and speaking.
Yeah, that kind of clarity is key.
We've pulled together key insights, facts, and perspectives, and we're gonna, unpack the most important ideas.
That's right. And these aren't just abstract concepts you might study for an exam, are they?
Not at all.
They're issues woven into the fabric of our world, impacting billions of lives, shaping economies, and really determining the very future of our planet. A foundational idea to grasp from the start is just how deeply interconnected these challenges are, and how fundamentally they're being driven by human activity.
Absolutely. So, what's our game plan for this exploration? We're going to start by looking at the broad scope of environmental problems. Everything from the air we breathe to the water we rely on.
The forests that cover the land.
The forests, yeah, and the incredible variety of life around us. Then we'll focus specifically on climate change, its root causes, its far-reaching, and frankly, often devastating consequences.
And importantly, the solutions too. We need to look at potential solutions being developed and implemented globally.
Yes, and just as importantly, examine the significant obstacles that make tackling these issues such a complex endeavor. It's not straightforward.
No, far from it.
Yeah.
Our aim really is to cut through the noise and get to the essential understanding. We want you to come away from this feeling well-informed, armed with specific details, compelling examples, and the vocabulary needed to engage meaningfully with these monumental topics.
Right, building that framework in your mind so you can see the connections and, understand the stakes involved.
Yeah.
Okay, let's really start unpacking this. We're kicking off with the sheer scale of environmental issues. The information points out, as you said, that these challenges aren't happening in isolation. They are profoundly interconnected.
It's less like a list of separate problems.
Yeah, more like a complex, dynamic system. You impact one part and it sends ripples through the whole thing.
That's a great way to put it.
And what's the primary force driving this interconnected web of issues?
Well, the data points strongly towards human activity. Our relentless pursuit of industrial growth, the rapid expansion of our cities.
And just the way we consume resources, right, at an ever-increasing pace. These are the engines behind many of these environmental strains.
That's a key distinction, isn't it? It's not nature just acting on its own.
No, it's a reaction in many ways to our actions. Everything from how we power our homes and industries to how we produce food and manage waste contributes to this cascade of problems. Understanding this human-centric cause is, essential for identifying potential solutions down the line. Okay, so let's pull on the first major thread in that environmental web, air pollution. This is highlighted as a truly pressing global issue, affecting almost everyone on the planet in some way.
It really is pervasive.
What are the main culprits here, according to the insights we've gathered?
Looking at the information, the primary sources are quite clear. Industrial emissions are a huge contributor, factories releasing a mix of pollutants into the atmosphere.
Right.
Then there are vehicle exhausts, especially in densely populated urban areas, pumping out harmful gases and particles.
Cars, trucks, buses, all of it.
Exactly. The burning of fossil fuels is another big one, whether in power plants to generate electricity or even in smaller residential furnaces for heating.
And agriculture too, surprisingly perhaps.
Yes, surprisingly to some. Even certain agricultural practices like livestock farming and the use of fertilizers can release pollutants like ammonia and methane into the air. It's not just factories and cars.
And the human cost of this is, it's staggering. The World Health Organization, the WHO, provides a deeply concerning estimate.
It's grim reading.
They link air pollution to 7 million premature deaths globally each year. Just try to picture that number.
7 million? It's almost impossible to comprehend.
Preventable tragedies annually. And they also estimate that about 90% of people worldwide are breathing air that contains pollutant levels exceeding safe guidelines.
90%. That means almost everyone listening right now is likely breathing air that poses some risk to their health.
Yeah.
It really underscores the universality of this problem.
And the health implications are severe and wide-ranging. What does the information flag specifically?
It specifically flags respiratory diseases, things affecting our lungs and breathing, and cardiovascular diseases, impacting the heart and blood vessels. These are strongly linked to exposure to fine particulate matter, often called PM2.5.
Ah, yes, the tiny particles.
That's right. They're less than 2.5 micrometers in diameter, so small they can penetrate deep into the lungs and even get into the bloodstream.
Which is terrifying.
It is. And nitrogen dioxide, or NO2, primarily from burning fuels, is another major culprit that irritates the respiratory system.
And this is where the connection to climate change becomes just undeniable, isn't it?
Absolutely. The very activities that release these health-damaging pollutants like burning fossil fuels for energy and transport are also the main sources of greenhouse gases.
Like CO2 and methane.
Exactly. Carbon dioxide, CO2, and methane, CH4. So the smog that chokes our cities and causes immediate illness is also contributing to the long-term warming of the planet. It's like a double burden from the same sources.
A double whammy, yeah. And we see this playing out differently around the world, which the examples illustrate quite well.
There's a contrast, for instance, between the challenges in rapidly developing nations, like India. Cities like Delhi often face hazardous air quality index, or AQI, levels.
Driven by what exactly there?
It's a combination of things. Rapid industrialization, a huge number of vehicles, population density, and sometimes, let's be honest, less rigorously enforced environmental regulations.
Compared to, say, developed cities.
Well, developed cities, like Los Angeles in the US, have made progress, certainly, but they still struggle with persistent smog. In LA, it's primarily from their massive vehicle population and specific geographic conditions that trap pollutants.
So the sources might differ slightly.
But the challenge of cleaning up the air is universal, fundamentally.
And beyond the immediate health effects, there are these significant economic and social costs.
Huge costs. The WHO estimates a staggering $225 billion annual loss in global labor productivity because people are getting sick from pollution.
$225 billion, that's a massive drain on economies.
It is. And it also impacts specific industries. Think about tourism. High levels of smog in major tourist destinations, like Beijing perhaps, can deter visitors.
Makes sense. And food security, too.
Yes, surprisingly. Ground-level ozone, which is a pollutant formed when other pollutants react in sunlight, can actually damage crops and reduce yields. This impacts food security in important agricultural regions, like the fertile Indo-Gangetic Plain.
And this situation also highlights something critical called environmental justice.
Yes. The information points out that air pollution often disproportionately affects marginalized communities. These are frequently areas located closer to polluting industries, major highways, or waste disposal sites.
And people living there,
who often have less political power and fewer economic resources, end up bearing a much greater burden of health problems caused by pollution they likely didn't create in the first place. It's a real equity issue.
So, what kinds of actions are being discussed or argued for to tackle this? What do the insights suggest?
Well, there are strong arguments for implementing stricter emission standards for industries and vehicles. That seems pretty clear.
Makes sense. Tighter rules.
Right. There's also a clear call for significant investment in clean energy sources to replace fossil fuels. A big shift.
And importantly,
the need for targeted policies specifically designed to protect those vulnerable communities most exposed to pollution. You can't have a one-size-fits-all approach.
Are there examples of places doing this well?
The city of Singapore is mentioned as a positive example. They're known for a pretty comprehensive approach, including strict air quality regulations, low emission zones in the city center, and significant investment in green public transport options.
So, effective regulation combined with forward-thinking investment seems key.
It appears so. But it's worth noting another related issue often overlooked in discussions about air quality.
Which is?
Indoor air pollution. This is presented as a very significant, often hidden problem, particularly prevalent in low-income countries.
Yes, I saw that. The material details this, explaining it impacts a huge number of people globally, estimated at 2.4 billion.
2.4 billion people, mainly women and children.
And the main culprit.
Cooking with biomass fuels. Things like wood, charcoal, or animal dung inside homes, often using inefficient stoves in poorly ventilated spaces.
Right, burning these fuels indoors.
Releases high levels of pollutants. We're talking particulate matter, carbon monoxide, and other toxic compounds right inside the home.
And the example given is rural India.
Yes. Rural India is used as an example where this practice is widespread, and directly contributes to chronic respiratory illnesses, especially among women and young children who spend the most time breathing that air. It's a major public health crisis hidden inside people's homes.
So the obvious solution is transitioning to cleaner cooking methods, right? Like liquefied petroleum gas, LPG, or electric stoves.
Or solar stoves, yeah. But the insights acknowledge the significant barriers, cost, and accessibility.
They're just too expensive.
Clean cooking technologies often have a higher upfront cost than traditional stoves or just gathering firewood. And the infrastructure needed to deliver fuels like LPG might not even exist in remote areas.
Which leads to a crucial argument made in the material,
which is that effectively addressing indoor air pollution requires financial intervention. Providing subsidies or financial assistance to make clean cooking technologies affordable and accessible in developing nations is absolutely critical.
It's not just about emissions then.
No, not at all. It's a fundamental health issue that could save millions of lives and reduce the burden of disease. It's health, environment, and development all rolled into one.
Okay, let's shift our focus from the air we breathe to the water that sustains us. Water pollution is another massive threat outlined in the information, damaging vital ecosystems and jeopardizing human health.
Another huge area, yeah.
What are the main sources identified here?
The sources point to several key culprits. Industrial discharge is a major one. Factories releasing untreated or poorly treated wastewater directly into rivers, lakes, or coastal waters.
Just dumping it.
Pretty much. Then there's agricultural runoff, laden with fertilizers, pesticides, and animal waste from farms. That washes into waterways and causes significant nutrient pollution.
Right, and big accidents.
Yes, large-scale incidents like oil spills from tankers or drilling platforms can have devastating immediate and long-term impacts. We've all seen images of those.
And plastics.
And the growing problem of plastic waste accumulating in rivers and oceans, that's a pervasive threat everywhere now.
And the global scale of this problem is frankly alarming. The United Nations reports that a staggering 80% of global wastewater is discharged without being treated.
80%? Just think about that. Most of the water we use in our homes, cities, and industries is going straight back into the environment, often full of harmful contaminants.
The material provides specific examples to kind of bring this home. The Ganges River in India.
Yes, the Ganges is highlighted as a case study of severe pollution. It's impacted by a mix of industrial effluents, raw sewage from the many cities along its banks, and even traditional practices like disposing of religious offerings or cremated remains.
Affecting millions of people.
Affecting more than 400 million people who live in the Ganges Basin and rely on the river for water. It's immense.
And ocean plastic.
On a different scale, the problem of ocean plastic is huge. Estimated 8 million metric tons enter the oceans annually.
8 million tons a year.
And this plastic doesn't just disappear. It breaks down into smaller and smaller pieces, known as microplastics.
Which get into the food chain.
Exactly. They're ingested by marine life and are now found throughout the food chain, potentially ending up on our dinner plates. The vast collections of debris like the Great Pacific Garbage Patch are just the visible symbols of this crisis.
So the impacts of water pollution are incredibly varied and severe. Direct health crises.
Yes, the WHO links 1.8 million deaths every year to unsafe water, causing diseases like cholera, dysentery, and typhoid.
And livelihoods.
It profoundly impacts people's livelihoods too. Fisheries can be decimated by pollution events, leading to economic hardship for coastal communities. Think about those affected by the Deepwater Horizon oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico back in 2010.
Right, devastating. And ecologically.
Ecologically, agricultural runoff causing excess nutrients leads to eutrophication. This process fuels massive algal blooms.
The green scum you see sometimes.
Exactly. And when these blooms die and decompose, they consume vast amounts of oxygen in the water, creating hypoxic conditions or dead zones where fish and most other aquatic life simply cannot survive. We see these in places like the Baltic Sea and the Gulf of Mexico.
So this situation strongly argues for comprehensive action. What does the material suggest?
It suggests the need for global agreements on waste management and wastewater treatment standards. We need international cooperation.
And public awareness.
Yes, public campaigns are crucial to raise awareness about reducing plastic use and promoting responsible disposal. And importantly, there needs to be rigorous enforcement of pollution controls on industries and agricultural operations. You need the rules, but you also need to enforce them.
Is there an example of effective policy?
The European Union's Water Framework Directive is cited as a successful example. It's a policy framework that has driven significant efforts to clean up and restore rivers and lakes across Europe, leading to the recovery of ecosystems and water quality in many areas. So it shows policy can work.
What's particularly interesting is that the issue isn't confined to surface water like rivers and oceans. The information also brings up groundwater.
Ah, yes, groundwater depletion and contamination. A crucial, often less visible subtopic.
How important is groundwater?
Groundwater is incredibly vital. It's estimated that 50% of the global population relies on groundwater for drinking water, and it's a major source for irrigation for growing food.
But it faces serious threats.
Serious long-term threats. Over-extraction is one, pumping water out faster than natural processes can replenish it. This is depleting these underground reserves, particularly in agricultural regions reliant on irrigation.
And pollution.
At the same time, pollutants from agriculture, industry, and poorly managed landfills can seep down through the soil and rock layers, contaminating these deep water sources.
There's a stark example given for that.
Yes, the widespread arsenic contamination in groundwater in Bangladesh. This affects an estimated 40 million people, causing chronic arsenic poisoning and severe health problems.
And cleaning it up is hard.
What makes groundwater contamination so challenging is that cleaning it up is incredibly difficult and expensive, often requiring complex treatment systems or finding alternative water sources altogether. Prevention is key.
Which underscores the importance of prevention and sustainable management.
Absolutely. Mitigation strategies include promoting more efficient irrigation techniques, regulating groundwater pumping, and implementing practices like rainwater harvesting to help replenish aquifers.
So the argument here is...
The argument is compelling. Protecting our groundwater is fundamental to long-term water security for billions of people. This requires not just addressing industrial and urban sources, but also regulating agricultural runoff and promoting land use practices that prevent contaminants from reaching these vital underground reserves in the first place.
Let's move on to deforestation, another absolutely critical environmental issue with profound connections to many of the other problems we've discussed. What are the main forces driving the clearing of forests around the world?
The insights point to several major drivers. The expansion of agriculture is probably the single largest cause.
Farming.
Yes, particularly large-scale commercial farming for products like cattle, for meat and leather, and monoculture crops like soybeans, often used for animal feed or biofuels.
And logging.
Logging, both legal and illegal, for timber and paper is another significant factor. Mining operations require clearing land, too.
And cities growing.
And the relentless expansion of human settlements and infrastructure through urbanization also consumes forest land. It's pressure from multiple angles.
Forests play such an unbelievably important role, don't they? The material really highlights their significance as massive carbon sinks.
Absolutely vital. They absorb huge amounts of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere as they grow, storing that carbon in their biomass, the wood, leaves, roots, and in the soil beneath them.
How much CO2 are we talking?
Estimates suggest forests absorb around 15.6 billion tons of CO2 annually and cover about 31% of the planet's land area. They're crucial climate regulators.
But when they're cut down?
Exactly. When forests are cut down or burned, that stored carbon is released back into the atmosphere, often quite rapidly if the trees are burned.
So deforestation actually causes emissions?
Yes. This is why deforestation is a major contributor to greenhouse gas emissions, accounting for around 15% of global totals. That's more than all the world's cars, trucks, trains, and planes combined.
Wow. That's a huge figure. The Amazon rainforest is the most famous example, often called the lungs of the earth, though I know that's not scientifically precise.
Right. But its role is huge nonetheless. The information notes that the Amazon has been reduced by about 11% since the 1970s.
Driven by what, mainly?
This loss is overwhelmingly driven by clearing land for cattle ranching and growing soybeans. It's agriculture expanding into the forest.
And this destruction isn't just about trees.
No, it's an ecological tragedy, threatening incredible biodiversity found nowhere else. And it impacts the lives and cultures of indigenous communities who have lived in balance with the forest for centuries.
And the impacts of deforestation ripple outwards, don't they?
They really do. It disrupts regional water cycles, potentially leading to reduced rainfall and increased drought conditions in surrounding or even distant areas.
And the soil.
It also increases soil erosion, as tree roots are no longer there to hold the soil in place. This leads to land degradation and desertification, the process where fertile land turns into desert-like conditions.
Where is this happening?
Parts of sub-Saharan Africa are experiencing this, with estimates that 20% of the land is degraded. And this cycle feeds back into climate change by releasing stored carbon, altering regional climates, and reducing the planet's overall capacity to absorb CO2. It's a vicious cycle.
Are there efforts to counteract this reforestation?
There are definitely efforts underway, such as large-scale reforestation initiatives. China's Great Green Wall is an ambitious project stretching across thousands of miles, aiming to combat desertification by planting trees.
But these projects face challenges.
Oh yes. The information notes the significant challenges securing adequate funding is a big one, navigating land use conflicts with local communities or agriculture, and just ensuring the survival rates of the planted trees in often challenging environments. It's not as simple as just planting trees.
So this leads to a clear argument for a multi-pronged approach.
Definitely. Reforestation is essential, yes, but it must be coupled with policies that address the root causes of deforestation, promoting sustainable land use practices, particularly in the agricultural sector where most pressure comes from.
And global cooperation.
Global cooperation is necessary because forests provide benefits like carbon storage and biodiversity to the whole world, not just the country they're in. There's also a strong case for financial incentives for countries and communities to protect forests, recognizing their global value.
Is there an example of that working?
Ethiopia's Green Legacy Initiative is highlighted as a positive example, a community-driven effort that mobilized millions of people to plant billions of trees since 2019, tackling both climate change and land degradation locally. It shows community involvement can be powerful.
And related to deforestation, the information specifically calls out illegal logging as a particularly destructive subtopic.
Yes, illegal logging is a massive problem with widespread consequences. It's estimated to account for a significant portion of the global timber trade, somewhere between 15% and 30%. Got that much. This activity directly fuels deforestation, operates outside of any environmental regulations, and undermines legitimate, sustainable forestry practices and conservation efforts. It's pure destruction for profit.
The example given is illegal logging in places like Borneo.
Exactly, which is destroying critical habitats for endangered species, like orangutans. It has direct impacts on wildlife.
So how do we address illegal logging?
It requires stricter enforcement of laws within timber-producing countries, often supported by international efforts. It also needs widespread adoption and support for certification schemes, like those provided by the Forest Stewardship Council, FSC.
So consumers can choose better.
Precisely. These schemes help consumers and businesses identify wood products that come from sustainably managed and legally harvested forests. The argument is that effectively combating illegal logging requires international trade regulations to prevent illegally sourced timber from entering global markets, coupled with increased consumer awareness and demand for certified sustainable timber. It needs action at both ends.
Okay, let's talk about biodiversity loss. The alarming decline in the variety of life on Earth. This seems like an issue that truly brings together all the problems we've discussed so far.
You're absolutely right. It's highly interconnected. The primary drivers identified are, well, the things we've been talking about. Habitat destruction largely due to deforestation, urbanization, and agricultural expansion.
Pollution, too.
Yes, pollution of air, water, and soil directly harms species and ecosystems. Overexploitation, like unsustainable hunting, fishing, and logging, removes species faster than they can reproduce.
And climate change itself.
And increasingly, climate change itself is a major driver. It's altering habitats, changing temperatures and rainfall patterns, forcing species to move if they can, and leading to shifts in where species can survive. It's an added pressure on top of everything else.
Like, the scale of this loss is really quite shocking. I saw a figure from the WWF.
Yes, the Worldwide Fund for Nature report highlighted a 68% decline in global wildlife populations on average since 1970.
68%. In less than a lifetime.
It's a devastating drop in the abundance of animals around the world. The information also mentions critically endangered species, like the Amur leopard, with fewer than 100 individuals left in the wild. We're talking about extinction happening right now.
And what's critical to understand is that this isn't just about losing individual species, sad as that is.
No, it's much bigger than that. It's about the threat to vital ecosystem services. These are the essential functions that healthy ecosystems perform for free, which underpin human well-being and survival.
Like what specifically?
Think about pollination of crops. Bees and other insects are responsible for pollinating around 75% of the global food crops we rely on. Water purification, soil fertility, flood control, climate regulation. These are all services provided by nature, by biodiversity.
And the example of bees.
The example of declining bee populations, partly due to pesticide use and habitat loss, directly illustrates how losing a key group of species can threaten something as fundamental as our food security. No bees, less food. It's quite direct.
And the impacts extend to cultural and economic spheres, too.
Absolutely. Indigenous communities around the world often have deep cultural connections to local biodiversity and rely directly on healthy ecosystems for their food, traditional medicines, and livelihoods. Think of communities in the Amazon.
And tourism.
Furthermore, the global ecotourism industry, worth over $1 trillion annually, depends heavily on healthy wildlife populations and intact natural landscapes. Kenya's Masai Mara ecosystem, famous for its incredible wildlife spectacles like the Great Migration, is a clear example of how biodiversity directly supports a significant portion of a nation's economy.
So conservation efforts are underway globally. Protected areas.
Yes, establishing protected areas, national parks, wildlife reserves, and creating wildlife corridors to allow animals to move safely between fragmented habitats are key strategies.
They face challenges.
Significant challenges,
Yeah.
including illegal poaching, conflict with human land use, encroaching on reserves, and simply securing sufficient funding to manage and protect these areas effectively. It's a constant battle.
This brings us to a powerful argument presented in the material,
which is that protecting biodiversity through global conservation efforts is absolutely essential, not just for ethical reasons or saving individual species, but for maintaining ecological stability, which directly underpins economic stability and human survival. They are linked.
And addressing this requires tackling the root threats.
Exactly. Habitat destruction, pollution, overexploitation, and critically, climate change, which is rapidly altering the conditions species need to survive.
Is there a success story mentioned?
Costa Rica is highlighted as a successful example. They've designated around 25% of its land area as national parks and protected areas. This has not only preserved incredible biodiversity, but has also significantly boosted its ecotourism industry, demonstrating that conservation can actually go hand in hand with economic benefits. It's not always either.
And within the topic of biodiversity loss, the information mentions invasive species as another significant contributing factor.
Yes, invasive species, another layer to the problem.
How do they get there?
These are species that are introduced to a new environment, often unintentionally through global trade or travel, stuck on ships, in cargo, things like that.
And in their new home.
In their new home, they may lack the natural predators or diseases that kept their populations in check in their native range. This allows them to reproduce rapidly and outcompete or prey on native species, disrupting the entire ecosystem balance.
An example.
The example of the lionfish in the Caribbean is given. It's a species from the Pacific that is now rapidly spreading and frankly devastating native fish populations on Caribbean reefs because nothing there eats it readily.
Can we control them?
Control measures exist, like targeted removal programs or sometimes biological controls, but once established, invasive species are often incredibly difficult and expensive to eradicate. Prevention is much better.
Which highlights an important argument.
That strengthening biosecurity measures at borders and ports is crucial. Preventing the introduction of invasive species in the first place is far more effective and less costly than trying to manage or remove them after they've established populations. It's a vital step in protecting native biodiversity and maintaining ecosystem health.
Okay, we've covered a range of interconnected environmental problems. Now let's really focus in on what many consider the defining challenge of our time: climate change itself. The information emphasizes that this is primarily driven by human-induced greenhouse gas emissions.
Yes, understanding the causes and consequences of climate change is absolutely fundamental to grasping the scale of the problem we face.
So the primary cause?
The primary cause, highlighted repeatedly across the sources, is the burning of fossil fuels, coal, oil, and natural gas.
For energy transport.
Exactly. When we burn these fuels for energy generation, transportation, industrial processes, and heating or cooling our buildings, they release huge amounts of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere.
Mainly CO2.
Primarily carbon dioxide, yes, but also methane and nitrous oxide. These gases act like a blanket, trapping heat and causing the planet to warm. This is the greenhouse effect, amplified by human activity.
But it's not solely about burning fossil fuels, although that is the biggest piece, right?
No, you're right. Other significant sources contribute as well. The information mentions livestock farming, particularly cattle.
Cow burps, basically.
Well, methane from their digestive processes, yes. It accounts for around 14.5% of global greenhouse gas emissions, which is significant.
And deforestation we covered.
Deforestation, as we discussed, releases stored carbon and reduces the number of trees available to absorb CO2. Industrial processes, like the production of cement used in construction, are also significant sources of CO2. Cement production alone accounts for about 8% of global CO2.
Even landfill.
Even the decomposition of organic waste in landfills produces methane, another potent greenhouse gas.
And the growth of urban areas.
The growth of urban areas globally also plays a role, increasing overall energy demand, which is often met by burning fossil fuels, especially in rapidly developing economies where urbanization and industrialization are happening quickly.
China, for instance.
China, for instance, is currently the largest emitter, accounting for around 27% of global emissions. That reflects its massive population and rapid economic growth built significantly on energy-intensive industries.
This brings up a crucial point about equity, highlighted in the information. The distinction between historical and current emissions.
Yes, this is really important. Developed nations, like the United States and those in the European Union, are responsible for a disproportionately large share of the greenhouse gases that are already in the atmosphere.
Because they industrialized earlier.
Exactly. Estimates suggest these countries are responsible for about 50% of the cumulative CO2 emitted since the start of the Industrial Revolution around 1850. They industrialized first, powered by fossil fuels, benefiting economically over centuries.
Whereas developing economies.
Now, rapidly developing economies like India, while growing contributors, still have much lower per capita emissions than developed nations. But they face significant international pressure to curb their growth and emissions simultaneously, which they see as unfair given the historical context.
This disparity leads to a critical argument.
That while a global transition to renewable energy and reduced emissions is essential for everyone, developed nations have a historical responsibility to lead.
Lead how?
This means not only making deep cuts to their own emissions, but also providing significant financial and technological support, known as climate finance and technology transfer, to help developing countries transition to cleaner energy and adapt to climate impacts without hindering their necessary development.
Is anyone doing this well? Developing countries leading?
China's enormous investment in renewable energy capacity is often cited. They added over 400 GW of solar and wind power by 2023, which was more than the rest of the world combined in that year. It's presented as an example of a major developing economy making significant strides in balancing energy needs with emissions reduction efforts, even while still being the largest overall emitter.
A specific economic mechanism mentioned in the information to help reduce emissions is carbon pricing. Can you explain that?
Yes. Carbon pricing is essentially putting a cost on emitting carbon dioxide. The idea is simple. Make polluting more expensive, thereby incentivizing businesses and individuals to reduce their emissions.
How does it work in practice?
It can be done through a carbon tax, where a price is applied directly to greenhouse gas emissions, or through a cap-and-trade system.
Cap-and-trade.
Where a limit or cap is set on the total amount of emissions allowed in a sector or economy, and companies can buy and sell emission permits amongst themselves. If you pollute less, you can sell your spare permits.
Is there an example where this has worked?
The Canadian province of British Columbia is given as an example. They introduced a carbon tax back in 2008, and studies reportedly showed it led to a 5–15% reduction in emissions per capita compared to other Canadian provinces.
Without hurting the economy.
Seemingly without negatively impacting overall economic growth. So these examples demonstrate that carbon pricing can be an effective tool for driving down emissions by creating a clear economic incentive.
But there are challenges.
Oh yes. The information also points out a significant challenge. Political resistance. Industries that are heavy emitters often lobby strongly against carbon pricing policies because they would face increased costs, potentially impacting their profitability.
Vested interests pushing back.
Exactly. This resistance has been a major obstacle to implementing carbon pricing in many places, including long-running debates in the United States. The argument here is that, while effective economically, successful implementation of carbon pricing requires substantial political will and sustained public support to overcome opposition from powerful interests.
Now, let's turn to the consequences of climate change, which are already being felt globally and are projected to become much more severe. The information details a range of widespread impacts. First and foremost, rising global temperatures.
Right. The planet has already warmed by about 1.1 degrees C since pre-industrial times, according to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC.
1.1 degrees Celsius. Doesn't sound like much.
It might sound small, but remember, it's a global average, and it's enough to significantly alter weather patterns. This warming is leading to more frequent and intense heat waves, which pose direct risks to human health.
Like the one in Europe recently.
The intense European heat wave in the summer of 2022, for instance, is estimated to have contributed to over 15,000 excess deaths. It has real, fatal consequences.
And those rising temperatures are fueling more extreme weather events?
Exactly. We're seeing an increase in the frequency and intensity of events like hurricanes and cyclones, heavy rainfall leading to floods, and prolonged periods of drought. The physics are quite clear on this.
Any specific examples?
Cyclone Idea in Mozambique in 2019 is mentioned as a devastating example. It was a powerful storm, amplified by warmer ocean waters, which caused widespread destruction and displaced over 1.8 million people. These events are becoming stronger and happening more often in a warmer world.
Sea level rise is another major consequence. What causes that?
It's caused primarily by two factors. First, the thermal expansion of ocean water. As it warms, warmer water takes up slightly more space. Second, and more significantly now, the melting of glaciers and ice sheets on land, pouring fresh water into the oceans.
How fast is it rising?
The information notes that global sea levels are currently rising at an average rate of about 3.7 millimeters per year.
Doesn't sound like much per year.
It might seem incremental, but over decades it really adds up. This poses an existential threat to low-lying island nations, like the Maldives in the Indian Ocean, which are just a few feet above current sea level. They could literally disappear.
And coastal cities.
Coastal cities around the world are also at risk, facing increased flooding from storm surges and high tides. The city of Jakarta in Indonesia is a dramatic example. It's already sinking due to factors like groundwater extraction, and rising sea levels are significantly exacerbating the flood risk there. They're even planning to move the capital city partly because of this.
Climate change also has direct impacts on food and water security.
Yes, absolutely. Changes in temperature and rainfall patterns, particularly increased frequency and intensity of droughts and desertification, are reducing crop yields in many regions.
Where is this particularly bad?
The material highlights estimates that in sub-Saharan Africa, for instance, climate impacts could lead to a 10–20% reduction in yields for staple crops, potentially affecting the food security of 20 million people who rely on that production. Water scarcity is also increasing in many areas as glaciers shrink and rainfall becomes less predictable.
There are significant health impacts beyond just heat waves and extreme weather events, too.
That's correct. Warmer temperatures can expand the geographic range of disease vectors, like mosquitoes and ticks.
Meaning diseases spread.
Potentially bringing vector-borne diseases such as malaria and dengue fever to new areas that were previously too cool for them. Furthermore, climate change contributes to conditions that make wildfires more frequent and intense.
Like in Australia.
The massive bushfires in Australia in 2020, for example, released huge amounts of smoke that severely worsened air quality across vast regions, causing respiratory problems for millions. It connects back to air quality.
And the economic costs of these consequences are projected to be enormous.
Staggering. The International Monetary Fund, the IMF, has estimated that unchecked climate change impacts could lead to global economic losses, potentially reaching $23 trillion by 2050.
$23 trillion.
It's a colossal figure. That encompasses the cost of repairing infrastructure damaged by extreme weather, losses in agricultural productivity, decreased labor productivity due to heat stress, managing health crises, and the costs of adapting to changes like sea level rise.
Finally, a consequence that carries immense human weight is the potential for climate refugees.
Yes. The United Nations, the UN, projects that by 2050, rising sea levels, increasing desertification, and other climate impacts could potentially displace as many as 200 million people from their homes.
200 million people forced to move.
Individuals and communities forced to migrate because their environment can no longer support them. This presents enormous humanitarian challenges, requiring mass relocation and aid, and can also create significant geopolitical tensions and instability as large populations move across borders or within countries.
So, looking at these severe consequences, what does the information suggest about action, particularly regarding the uneven impact? We talked about equity before.
Well, given that the impacts are disproportionately severe in vulnerable nations, which often have contributed at least to historical emissions, the material strongly argues for global financial mechanisms. There's a clear need for support structures.
Support to do what?
To help these nations not only mitigate their own emissions, but crucially, adapt to the changes that are already locked in and manage the humanitarian challenges, including potential resettlement for those displaced by climate impacts. It's about adaptation as much as mitigation for some.
Is there an example of adaptation?
The Netherlands Room for the River project is given as an example of adaptation in a developed nation. Instead of just building higher dikes, they are strategically creating space for rivers to safely flood during peak flows, acknowledging higher water levels are coming and working with nature, not just against it.
So that kind of thinking needs to be global.
This kind of proactive adaptation is needed globally, but crucially, with financial support directed to those who need it most but can least afford it.
This naturally leads us to the discussion of solutions. The information consistently emphasizes that addressing these intertwined environmental and climate challenges requires a massive combined effort.
From individuals, governments, international bodies, everyone working together. Absolutely. There's no single silver bullet. It's a portfolio of actions needed across every sector.
And one of the most critical areas for action is transitioning to renewable energy.
Fundamental. Replacing fossil fuels with clean sources like solar power, wind power, hydropower, and geothermal energy is presented as absolutely key to reducing greenhouse gas emissions.
Are there examples of countries doing well here?
The material highlights countries that have made significant progress. Denmark, for instance, gets over 50% of its electricity from wind power already. And Costa Rica has achieved an impressive feat, meeting around 99% of its electricity needs from renewable sources, mainly hydro and geothermal.
So it is possible.
These examples show what's possible. However, scaling renewables globally faces significant challenges. Well, the initial investment costs can be high, although they are falling rapidly, which is good news. Integrating variable sources like solar and wind, which only generate power when the sun is shining or the wind is blowing into existing power grids, requires costly upgrades and energy storage solutions like batteries.
And land use.
And large-scale renewable projects like vast solar farms or extensive wind turbine arrays can sometimes lead to land use conflicts or environmental concerns regarding habitat disruption or, say, bird collisions with turbines. These need careful management.
So this gives rise to an argument that achieving a widespread shift requires...
It requires significant government support, really, in the form of subsidies, favorable policies to encourage investment, alongside massive private sector commitment. It also means carefully planning and managing the deployment of renewable infrastructure to minimize its own environmental footprint. You don't want to solve one problem by creating another.
Is there an example of ambitious policy?
India's incredibly ambitious target of installing 500 GW of renewable energy capacity by 2030 is cited as an example of a major economy setting a bold policy direction to drive this transition, despite also relying heavily on coal currently. It shows the intent is there.
Beyond energy, adopting sustainable practices across various sectors is crucial for reducing environmental impact.
Yes. Things like the circular economy concept.
Explain that briefly.
Moving away from a linear take, make, dispose model where we extract resources, make products, use them briefly, and throw them away to one where materials are reused, repaired, and recycled as much as possible to minimize waste and keep resources in use for longer.
And waste to energy.
Waste to energy initiatives, where waste that cannot be recycled is burned under controlled conditions to produce electricity, are also mentioned as part of the solution in some places.
Examples.
Examples include Sweden, which converts an impressive 99% of its household waste into energy, or recycles it, very little goes to landfill. And Japan, known for its high recycling rate, exceeding 80% for municipal waste through meticulous sorting.
And sustainable agriculture.
Sustainable agriculture is another key area. Practices like agroforestry, integrating trees into farming landscapes, as seen in parts of Brazil, not only diversifying income for farmers and enhance biodiversity, but also improve soil health and help sequester carbon in the trees and soil.
So the argument is that shifting to these practices requires...
It requires significant investment in infrastructure, like modern recycling facilities and renewable energy grids to power them. And crucially, widespread public education and behavior change. People need to participate.
Is there an example of policy driving behavior change?
Germany's successful bottle deposit return system, the PIN system, is shown as a powerful example. It has resulted in a remarkable 98% return rate for recyclable bottles, demonstrating how smart policy can drive significant positive shifts in public behavior and boost recycling rates dramatically.
A specific type of sustainable practice in urban environments is green architecture.
Yes, this involves designing and constructing buildings that minimize environmental impact throughout their life cycle.
What are the features?
Features include energy-efficient designs that reduce the need for heating and cooling, using sustainable and recycled building materials, incorporating rooftop solar panels, rainwater harvesting systems, and green spaces like green roofs or walls. The aim is to reduce the building sector's significant contribution to energy consumption and carbon emissions.
Is there a well-known example?
Singapore's Gardens by the Bay, while a unique and iconic landmark, incorporates many principles of green architecture and sustainable design, like integrating solar power collection and utilizing harvested rainwater within its structures.
So the argument here is that promoting green architecture
Through building codes, incentives for developers, and public awareness can significantly cut the carbon footprint of cities, which are major sources of emissions globally. It needs regulatory support from governments to encourage developers and builders to adopt these practices widely, as the upfront costs can sometimes be higher, even if they save money long term.
Looking at the bigger picture, international cooperation is presented as absolutely essential for tackling global environmental challenges like climate change. You can't solve it country by country.
No, you really can't. Global agreements are key mechanisms, like the Paris Accord.
What's the aim of the Paris Accord?
Countries commit to setting national targets to limit global warming to well below 2 degrees C, ideally aiming for 1.5 degrees C compared to pre-industrial levels. These agreements rely on countries fulfilling their national commitments, which vary, and involve mechanisms like climate finance.
Foreign finance.
Institutions like the Green Climate Fund have been established, with wealthier nations pledging financial support to help developing countries invest in clean energy and adapt to climate impacts. Pledges have totaled around $10 billion initially, but the information points out that significant funding gaps still persist compared to the estimated trillions needed globally. The money isn't flowing fast enough.
And technology transfer.
Technology transfer, providing access to and training on green technologies like solar power or energy efficiency measures to countries in Africa or Asia, is highlighted as critical for ensuring that solutions are accessible and effective globally, not just concentrated in wealthy nations.
This links back strongly to the argument about historical responsibility.
Exactly. Developed nations, having benefited from earlier industrialization fueled by fossil fuels, must take a leading role in providing climate finance to ensure equitable solutions globally, acknowledging their historical contribution to the problem. It's seen as a matter of fairness.
Is there an example of this cooperation?
The African Union's Renewable Energy Initiative, receiving support from entities like the European Union, is given as a positive example of international cooperation, supporting the expansion of solar projects and other renewables across the continent, helping fund that transition.
And finally, while systemic change is paramount, individual actions also play a role in the larger picture.
They do. Actions like reducing personal energy consumption at home, opting for public transportation, cycling or walking instead of driving, minimizing plastic waste, or making more sustainable consumer choices. These are all examples of individual actions people can take.
Do they make a difference?
Well, the information mentions that global movements pushing for environmental action, partly fueled by grassroots efforts from concerned individuals and communities, have contributed to policy changes. For example, the ban on single-use plastics, now implemented in over 120 countries, was partly driven by public pressure.
But the perspective shared is...
While individual actions are valuable for raising awareness, building momentum, and demonstrating public support for change, the perspective shared is that systemic transformations driven by government policies and corporate accountability ultimately have a far larger and more rapid impact scale.
So the argument is that individual actions are important for fostering a culture of sustainability and signaling demand for change.
But it's policies like taxes, regulations, and investments, alongside corporations adopting responsible practices across their supply chains, that drive the truly large-scale systemic shifts needed to address these massive challenges effectively.
Is there an example of policy amplifying individual action?
The UK's plastic bag tax, introduced in 2015, is presented as a clear example. It led to an astonishing 85% reduction in plastic bag usage in large retailers almost overnight. It shows how a relatively simple policy can amplify the impact of individual choices and drive rapid, widespread behavioral change.
The role of technology is also highlighted as absolutely pivotal in developing and scaling solutions to these environmental and climate issues.
Hugely important. The material points to specific cutting-edge technologies. Carbon capture and storage, or CCS.
What's that?
It involves trapping CO2 emissions from industrial sources like power plants or cement factories and storing them deep underground, usually in depleted oil and gas fields or saline aquifers, preventing them from reaching the atmosphere.
Is it how?
Norway's Longship project is mentioned as an example, aiming to capture and store 1.5 million tons of CO2 annually from industrial facilities. It's still relatively small-scale globally and expensive, but developing.
And electric vehicles.
Electric vehicles, or EVs, are crucial for decarbonizing transport, replacing gasoline and diesel engines with electric motors powered by batteries, ideally charged with renewable electricity.
Who's leading on EVs?
Norway has become a world leader here, with EVs accounting for over 80% of new car sales in 2023, driven by significant government incentives like tax breaks and perks like free parking or toll roads.
Again, farming.
Precision agriculture uses technologies like artificial intelligence, AI, satellite imagery, GPS, and drones to monitor crops, soil conditions, and weather in real time.
Yeah.
This allows farmers to use water, fertilizers, and pesticides much more efficiently, only where and when needed, reducing waste and environmental impact.
Examples of that.
Smart farms in places like Australia are using AI to optimize irrigation schedules and predict yields, saving resources.
So these technologies hold immense promise, but they also come with challenges.
Definitely. High costs can be a barrier to widespread adoption, particularly in developing nations that might benefit greatly from them, but lack the necessary financial resources or infrastructure, think charging networks for EVs, or reliable internet access for precision agriculture. There's often unequal access globally.
Which underscores the argument that while green technology is a vital part of the solution portfolio,
Governments and international bodies must play a significant role in supporting research and development, providing subsidies to lower costs, and facilitating technology transfer to ensure these tools are accessible and affordable in poorer nations. You need policy to drive tech adoption fairly.
any other tech examples?
Japan's efforts in developing hydrogen fuel technologies are also highlighted. They have over 10,000 hydrogen fuel cell vehicles deployed and are investing in hydrogen fuel stations, showcasing how different technological pathways are being explored beyond just battery electric for transport and energy storage. Lots of innovation happening.
Now, having explored the issues, causes, consequences, and solutions, it's important to acknowledge the significant challenges in actually addressing these environmental issues on the necessary scale and timeline. It's far from easy.
No, it's incredibly difficult, and the information outlines several key obstacles.
One major challenge is the prioritization of economic growth over immediate environmental action.
Yes, for many countries, particularly those with large populations and ongoing development needs, often heavily reliant on existing fossil fuel infrastructure, like coal power plants, the perceived costs of transitioning to cleaner energy or implementing stricter environmental regulations can seem like a barrier to essential economic growth and poverty reduction. It's a tough trade-off, or perceived as one.
India's situation.
India's reliance on coal, despite its huge renewable energy ambitions, is sometimes cited as an example of this tension between development needs and environmental goals.
Political resistance is another enormous hurdle.
Huge, powerful vested interests, particularly from the fossil fuel industries, often actively lobby against policies that would accelerate the transition away from their products. Things like carbon taxes or tighter regulations on emissions face strong opposition.
We see this in the U.S.
Debates around climate policy in the United States have often highlighted the significant influence of such lobbying efforts in slowing down or blocking action.
Global inequity is a profound challenge we keep coming back to.
It really is. Developing nations often suffer disproportionately from the severe impacts of climate change, facing events like severe droughts, floods, storms, despite having contributed relatively little to the historical emissions that caused the problem in the first place.
Like in Africa.
African nations, for instance, collectively contribute only about 3% of global emissions, but are among the most vulnerable to climate impacts like drought and food insecurity. This creates real tension regarding who should bear the cost and responsibility for action and adaptation. Who pays?
Public awareness and understanding can also be a significant barrier.
Absolutely. Misinformation and outright climate denialism, often spread deliberately, can undermine the political will needed to enact ambitious policies. Building broad public support for potentially difficult or costly transitions, like moving away from fossil fuels or changing consumption patterns, is challenging, especially in regions where access to reliable information is limited.
And technological barriers again.
And as we touched on, technological barriers, the high cost and unequal access to green technologies limit their adoption in poorer nations, even when the political will might be there. A country might want to leapfrog fossil fuels and adopt solar, but if the panels and batteries are prohibitively expensive or the technical expertise isn't available locally, it remains out of reach without support.
So the argument presented is that overcoming these complex and interconnected challenges requires
It requires strong global leadership willing to prioritize long-term sustainability over short-term economic gains. It requires widespread education to foster understanding and build public support for change. And crucially, it necessitates equitable resource distribution and financial mechanisms, climate finance again, to ensure that all nations, particularly those most vulnerable and least responsible, have a capacity to participate in and benefit from solutions.
Is there an example of this tension playing out?
The example of Brazil's resistance at times to strengthening Amazon protection policies, highlighting the tension between national development goals and the globally recognized value of the rainforest, sort of encapsulates the difficult trade-offs and political complexities involved.
Okay, we've taken a really deep dive into a wealth of detail here, from, wow, microscopic pollutants and drivers of deforestation to the mechanics of global emissions,
The grim realities of rising seas.
the promise of renewable energy and green tech, and the very real political and economic hurdles that stand in the way. The entire point, really, has been to build a robust, interconnected understanding of these issues.
Precisely. And having this detailed understanding, including the specific examples we've discussed for, Delhi's hair, the Ganges River, the Amazon, the Maldives, Denmark's wind power, Germany's recycling, and the relevant vocabulary, is incredibly valuable.
How so?
Well, it gives you the concrete details and framework needed to articulate your ideas clearly, whether you're discussing these topics in conversation, writing an essay, or maybe tackling a listening or speaking task for something like IELTS, as you mentioned earlier.
Right. It's about being able to structure your thoughts logically, considering the underlying causes, the wide-ranging effects, the potential pathways forward with solutions, and the significant challenges that need to be overcome.
And being able to support those points with compelling examples. It shows you've really engaged with the material.
Engaging with topics at this level of detail moves you beyond just surface-level knowledge and helps you develop a more nuanced perspective, which is key for effective communication, I think.
Absolutely.
So what does this all mean as we wrap up this deep dive? We've explored the vast, interconnected web of environmental issues, delved into the clear human causes and the profound, far-reaching consequences of climate change,
Looked at the promising solutions being developed and implemented around the world,
and examined the significant hurdles that make addressing these issues such a complex and urgent task.
This exploration really underscores that understanding these topics isn't just about acquiring knowledge for a specific purpose, like an exam. It's about grasping one of the most critical, defining challenges facing humanity in the 21st century. It affects everyone, everywhere, no exceptions.
Okay, so here's a final thought for you, the listener, to consider as you process everything we've discussed today. Given the immense complexity, the overwhelming scale of the challenges we've outlined, and the scientific urgency that calls for rapid action, how do we ensure that the urgency we feel in translating information into understanding actually translates into effective, widespread action?
That's the crucial question, isn't it?
What does it truly take, on both an individual level and a global scale, to bridge that gap between knowing what needs to be done and actually doing it? It's a question that sits right at the heart of this whole challenge.
It is indeed something to really reflect on. We encourage you to continue exploring these vital topics, to keep asking questions, and to seek out reliable information. Stay curious.
And if you found this deep dive valuable and insightful, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to the Learn English Lab YouTube channel.
Your support really helps us continue creating deep dives like this one.
Thanks so much for joining us today.